In this video, I'm going to be discussing what the clear area outside screen does in Easy Green Screen 8. What this is intended to do is automatically remove areas that are outside of the green screen. For instance, this background here and this floor here that's in front of the screen. Now the caveat is that you have to have green around the entire subject for this to work. So for example, in this image where the feet are extended past the screen and onto the floor, it will not work for an image like this. Just let me demonstrate here. You see that did clear those areas. And if we run it on this image, it's not going to. Now, one thing I'll point out too is there is a way to use the old version 6 method, which make sure to watch the next video. I'm going to show you how to do that through an action in the batch. But just as far as this checkbox goes, it's not going to. And the reason why is because the old method with version 6 had a tendency to remove sports equipment like this lacrosse net here, or a baseball bat or a hockey stick. That method had a tendency to erase those. And in order to prevent that from happening, I had to change the way it worked. So now what it does is it basically just looks at your foreground in the mask, and anything that's attached to your foreground it keeps. And when it comes to areas that are black in the mask, that's how it knows that those objects are no longer connected to your subject. And so anything outside of that, it can erase. So for example, in this image, it's able to keep this lacrosse net because it sees in the mask this is attached to the subject, but so is the floor. It's through the mask making connection. So the software has no way to differentiate that this is a lacrosse stick and this is the floor. Although, as mentioned, I do have a way to do that through actions that can be batched with Easy Green Screen. So watch the next video if you're wanting the old version 6 method. The last thing I'll demonstrate here is the only time that this will actually remove something is if you have, like, let's say a player throwing up a ball here and that's not attached to your subject. So for example, I know the baseball players, sometimes they'll throw up a ball in their photo. And in this case, even with this clear area outside the screen checked, it's usually going to remove this. Not always, but most of the time it will. In this case, it did. Now this is non-destructive because if we look in our mask, you can see that is still there. So instead of erasing the foreground mask, it actually instead goes up and puts an additional mask up on the group here. And you can see it's just a pretty rough outline. And if I select that, you can see that we've got our marching ants. So anything outside of this selection is what it's removing. So if we want to get that back, we would just, in this mask here on this extracted image layer, we would just grab a white brush and you're going to paint that foreground back in. You don't even need to find the lines here. If you paint too much, you can bring back something you don't want. So anyway, it's just really easy to paint that back in. You don't even have to, like I say, try to paint on the lines. If we look in our mask here, you can see where I've painted. And so that's why it puts it in this mask, because like I say, that keeps the detail in your foreground mask to make that non-destructive. That might be confusing for some people. If it is, I'm sorry, but that's just where it puts it. The last thing I'm going to show is something that can happen. is if your subject is got green around the subject, but it's close to the edge. Something like this, and you're using the clear area outside screen. It's going to clear it except for anything that's too close right here. And if I load that selection in for the mask, you can see that's because it's making a selection that's wider than our subject. I'm not going to get into all the technical details, but this is just the way I had to make it in order to not remove sports equipment and still be able to remove areas. So the bottom line is, when you're shooting, if you want to use this in batch and have everything go smoothly, make sure you've got green around your subject and you've got enough area outside of the subject to so they're not too close to the edge, with the exception of the feet. Because as you can see in this, the outline here, you can have the feet really close to the edge because of where it makes this selection. So that way, if you're going to put them in the very front of a floor to avoid spill, you can get them really close to the front of the floor. But on the edges, just make sure on the edges, left and right, and on the top, you have a little bit of a margin. Anyway, that's about all there is to this. But if, like I say, if you're wanting to do images like this, make sure to watch the video where I show you how to make an action to do that. There's a bunch of different ways you can make actions for this. And I actually am going to give away a set of actions you can use for that as well. So thanks for watching, and make sure to watch the next one if you're wanting to use the old version 6 method.